statistics on the news a lot. We use data because statistics are a great tool for understanding and giving some perspective to large-scale ideas and issues. Sometimes it's just a matter of math. For example, finding the median home price in Raleigh. For that, you just look at all the home sales for the month. Then you find the one that's right there in the middle. Half the homes sold for more, half sold for less, and that number in the middle is the median. But other stats are more, well, abstract, like giraffes being 30 times more likely to get hit by lightning than people. All people? Or, people who live in the same region as giraffes? Also, how do they know about every giraffe that's getting hit by lightning? It's not like the other animals can call 911 when they see it happen, that sort of thing. There are a lot of variables, and they can create a more complicated puzzle that can't really be summed up in a headline, unless you're the media, because we love doing that. For instance, the state just released crime data from our schools, and the findings drew some startling headlines, like school crime soars in NC public schools. It's now 38% above pre-pandemic levels. Here's a chart explaining the trend in our schools, showing that steady decline in crime over the past decade and spiking hard and fast in the last 2 years, up 18% from just last year. Here's the list of what they consider crime and violence. Feel free to give it a pause and read over it. But some of the biggies are drugs, weapons, assaults, sex offenses, bomb threats, etc., things like that. If you take the cut and dry approach, according to the numbers, our schools are simply more dangerous. But as Mark Twain once said, facts are stubborn things, but statistics are pliable. Here's what I mean. Just before the pandemic, the state implemented the Say Something Anonymous reporting system, which has been very successful, bringing in thousands of tips that they just weren't getting before. The director of the Center of Safer Schools said as much, saying part of the increase is that now there is a mechanism to identify these things. In fact, there are lots of mechanisms now in our schools. Keep in mind, we now have more police, more cameras and weapons detection systems in our school buildings than ever before. We have spent millions of dollars to fortify our schools, which is interesting considering that the crime numbers are going up. Shouldn't they go down after that investment? Frankly, it's unclear if these changes have deterred crime or just increased the likelihood that these crimes are reported. But there's also a chance that it's doing both. We can look at Texas, for instance. Some schools there are now using surveillance tech to catch students vaping. So think about it. It's a tool that could essentially catch more kids in the act while also deterring other kids from doing it at all. Meaning it is possible you'd see a rise in the number of kids caught vaping, even though overall fewer kids are actually doing it. The relevance of complex data relies on analysis. Let's look at another stat that seemed rather concerning, an increase in suspensions and expulsions. They rose across the board, short-term suspensions, long-term suspensions, and expulsions. Some up 22% since the pandemic, and some numbers even doubling. And while that might seem like objective data, it's not. And to explain, I want to bring in WRAL education insider Emily Walkenhorst. Emily, you and I have discussed this in the past, and punishment is done on a case-by-case basis in our schools.
Right. So generally speaking, there's a lot of leeway for principals. There's no table or matrix that says if a student does this, they have to be punished in that way. So basically, it's kind of up to the principal and could vary quite a bit school to school.
And the potential for this bias isn't going unacknowledged. For instance, the data is showing that black students are being are punished harsher in many cases than white students. And the state has tried to figure out exactly why this has happened. They're trying to change things about it, but it does underscore that they know that there is bias that weighs into these numbers.
Right, they do know. And the thinking among a lot of advocates, people very involved in schools, is that students are just being treated differently. That a white student who talks back to a teacher might be treated differently than, say, a black student who talks back to a teacher. So they've known about this. Education leaders really want to do something about it, but these numbers have been around for years.
Now, I've been spending a lot of time tonight talking about why we need to look beyond these numbers to get kind of the full picture and perspective on school safety. And you have unique access to some different perspectives because you know so many teachers. I'm wondering what you're hearing on the record, off the record. How are teachers feeling, and what are their experiences like compared to the data that we are seeing?
Right, so I hear from teachers who talk about, the kids really aren't doing so well right now. They've observed more kids behaving poorly or more kids who are just struggling emotionally. And there is some data kind of starting to bear that out. I mean, these statistics we talked about today, which are more nuanced, but, are coupled with teacher surveys that indicate a higher percentage of teachers, just kind of going up every year they do the survey, are saying students aren't really following the rules anymore. In 2022, the state survey said 40% of teachers thought students weren't necessarily following the rules at their school. So we do kind of see some signs in data that things are not okay.
Got it. Emily, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I think that this context is important to fully understanding the big picture. Now, if any of you at home have thoughts on this or questions, you know how to find us. You can send me an email to dan@WRAL.com. And I know this issue is very important to so many of you at home because safety at our schools is routinely a top concern for parents and students and teachers and everybody, so much so that the state is adding these threat assessment teams to scan for risks. It's being sold as something that will save lives. In today's world, that's something that we think about when we drop our kids off at school. I know I do, and one of the main reasons that parents want their kids to have cell phones in the classroom. Cell phones. Some school districts are starting to ban them, even here in North Carolina. And I want to hear your thoughts on cell phones in the classroom. Tell me what you think about kids and those cell phones that they bring every day. I've been talking with some friends about this. I've been talking to young people, and I've been a little surprised at some of the perspectives that I've heard. And I want to hear yours. Please, here's that email once again, dan@WRAL.com. Tell me what is on your mind, and we'll go in depth.